Hello, and welcome to the Things I Want My Daughters to Know podcast, the podcast redefining women's health, one unfiltered conversation at a time. I'm your host, Jacqueline Rose, and every week I'll sit down with leading women's health experts and real women to share their lived experiences, bust health myths, challenge outdated and uninformed narratives, and explore what's really possible for women. We'll talk about periods, fertility, menopause, hormones, aging, and everything in between. This podcast is for every woman who ever felt confused, dismissed, or left out of the conversation about her own health. It is a space to celebrate women, break the silence, and open up conversations between mothers, daughters, sisters, and friends. Please hit the follow or subscribe button so you don't miss an episode, and share this podcast with your daughters, family, and friends. Let's get on with the episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Things I Want My Daughters to Know podcast. Thank you for joining me. I am very excited for our guest. We're going to be talking about some heavy, serious stuff today, but I know it's going to resonate with so many of you because we are going to be really talking about this intergenerational stuff that goes on between mothers and daughters that become mothers, and a lot of the different things that affect us as we navigate through life. So it's going to be a really fascinating conversation. Welcome, Stacy. You are our guest today. Thank you so much for joining us. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and we'll get straight into our conversation.
Thank you for having me. So I am Stacy Schaffer. I am a child, adolescent, and young adult therapist. Located in Arvada, Colorado, which is outside of Denver. And I see kids, teens, young adults in private practice. But the most exciting news recently is that I wrote a book this year. Well, I guess it was like last year.
Yeah, we're in 2026 now.
Called With Love from a Children's Therapist, #lessons I've learned along the way.
Amazing. And we'll definitely have a link to the book in our show notes. But I guess the first question, because this is quite an intense profession, it's quite an intense topic to be a child therapist, dealing with trauma and all things like that. So tell me how you got into this area and sort of a little bit more of the specifics about what you do. And then we'll see how that sort of translates into being a woman and how sort of as we age, we sort of navigate those things that happen to us in our teens.
Sure. Well, and at some point we might want to see, I have a therapy dog in training. She's a golden retriever. We might want to see her because she's
wow.
Willow is the star of the show. But so I knew from a young age that there had to be adults who knew what they were doing. I just didn't know any of them. And so I was raised by a single parent, and I experienced abuse early on and tried to talk to my mom about it, but she had no window of tolerance, wasn't able to hear it. And, spoiler alert, she had her own stuff that wasn't dealt with. And so it was like trauma after trauma, like compounded. There's a picture of me when I was little and I was counseling Care Bears in a semicircle. Like, they worked things out, except for Grumpy Bear had some challenges because you have to be willing, And so my mom got really sick with breast cancer when I was a tween, and I was already headed. I was like, I want to help people because I was not getting any kind of support. And that's the thing with a lot of clinicians. Like, you're like, you want to save the younger you, but you have to do your work in order to be healthy and do that.
Yeah.
And so my mom died in 2001, in June of 2001. And I was already I was in college. I was headed to grad school. And so I kind of developed a specialty of grief. And so I just believe that if I'd had early intervention, if at any big point, any small point rather, in my journey, that had there been quality care, the trajectory of my story would have been different. So that's what I try to offer to others.
Yeah. Wow. Very powerful, very meaningful, very deep. So tell us a little bit about the demographic that you work with, ages, what you're seeing, what they're experiencing. Um, we know that our teens today are not, we always seem to glorify yesteryear, the 80s were the best or the 90s were the best, and the children of today don't get it and all that stuff. But I think there really are some profound things that our teens today are exposed to and are experiencing that we never needed to deal with as kids of the 70s and 80s. So who do you work with? What are you seeing? What sort of some of the main traumas that are coming up? Yeah, let's start there.
Yeah. And it's funny they say the 80s because Stranger Things 5 just came out,
Yes,
and so the kids are like, the 80s are so cool.
I know. My kids are all into the 80s music, and I'm like, I know, it's the best.
Yeah, like one of the big songs from there, the artist is like, I never expected to become popular this many years later. And so yeah, I say that I deal in between the ages of 3 and 30. I have a lot of clients that I've seen since like teens that have just like, stayed for connection. And some of them are like, when are you going to kick me out? I'm like, never. I'm always going to be older than you. And so I specialize in grief, but I see a lot of kids with anxiety is probably the number one reason. And as for things kids are dealing with, I would say kind of the big glaring things are problems and challenges with social media. And I would say something that feels uniquely American is the school violence issue.
Yeah.
And it's really tragic. I'm in the district that one of the major ones just happened.
Yeah.
And so that's a big thing. But I think that social media, it highlights some of the things that kids have already been experiencing. It's just on display. And so I see a lot of that. And so kind of a lot of existential crisis, frankly. Kids are like, the world is on fire. And you're like, well.
And not to be facetious, but you don't think that when we were teens, we being, I'm now 51, born in 1974, sort of had my teen years in the 80s, and not to sort of, again, idealize what was, but do you see a difference in the challenges and in what teens today need to deal with versus what teens 20 or 30 years ago had to deal with?
I mean, I think in lots of cases, like with just the social media piece, I think if kids were going to leave another kid out, the other kid would go, like in the 80s, like just go home and maybe not know, have a hunch.
Yeah.
But now it's in their face and they're like seeing a TikTok being made with all of their friends
Yeah.
that it could potentially be passive aggressive. They use the like find my friends or like snap maps all the time. I like, why do we need to know where people are at all times? Like, it's so weird to me. Like, kids have found out that they both go to me like using snap maps. They're like, oh, like, it's weird. And so I think that, to have in your face, all my friends are at bagels and I'm not. I think that adds another layer.
100%.
But kids have always been left out, bullied, isolated, all of that. It's just more obvious in that capacity.
No, I know. I have, as I've mentioned before, I've been blessed with 5 kids. My 3 daughters were on the podcast, the first episode. Definitely go back and listen. My 16-year-old daughter tells me, I mean, this is a feature that is definitely playing into her mental health state. All my friends went out and they didn't invite me. And I'm like, how do you know? And she's like, well, they posted it on their WhatsApp status. And I'm like, oh dear. Like, what do you say? And so that's sort of why I want to come in sort of in terms of I guess, 2 questions in like, what is the parental role here? Because we don't have the tools because we never experienced it in the same way. I mean, there was, as you said, there was bullying, there was, isolation, there was not being included. So how do we as parents cope, like deal with that? And then what does that mean for these teens as we age and as we grow up? It's not even the teens of today. You were a teen who experienced trauma, and now you're a fully grown adult who has figured out how to navigate it. So what are we seeing here, this interplay between this the parents' role and understanding, and then the teens of how they're going to age and mature and grow up, and the types of adults that they're going to become.
Yeah. I think that something I talk about a lot is like the actual question of like, help me understand what it's like to be you. Because I think a lot of times what happens is that a kid will be like, Mom, like all my friends are doing the XYZ, blah, 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 whatever. And a parent very much trying to create a bridge of health will say, I get it. I was a kid once too. That line I feel like is a shutdown valve. Because the kid's like, you don't know what it's like, because we did experience like the core of a lot of those things, right? But we don't know. Like I also don't know what it's like to be afraid to go to school, frankly. And so that was not my experience. Like the first school shooting the big one was after I had already left high school. Yeah. And so I don't know what that's like to like live in that state, but I know what it's like to be afraid. And so I think that it's important for parents and grown-ups, caretakers to offer up, like I want to hear your experience. There are elements I can connect with, but I don't know what it's like. I do not. And the same will be too 20 years from now. We don't know. It's a different world. And so I think owning that, like, I am like a traveler in your world and I haven't already navigated it, I think opens the conversation.
Fascinating. So what type of modalities are you using? What type of techniques are you using with your clients? How do you sort of, help them navigate these things?
Yeah. Well, I really like, I have a sand tray table. I don't know how much you know about sand tray, but it's one of my favorites. It's usually with like some of the younger kids.
Yeah.
Do you know much about sand tray?
No.
Okay, so it's probably the number one modality with like younger kids, and I use it with like teenagers. And I've done trainings as an adult, and it's been helpful. But I have this big table I have 2 rooms in my other office, and it's gutted. And my friend Dave made it. It's beautiful, and it's full of this special kind of sand. And then you look over, and there's like every Happy Meal toy in family groups, like all lined up.
Yeah.
And so a thing that you do is like one of the directives is show me what it's like to be you. Pick a character to be you and show me your world. And it's fascinating. Like, because it's really symbolic. It's like I had a kid with a really high conflict divorce that put their little character in the middle, and then they picked Darth Vader as dad and a tiny mouse as mom. Like, and they were in between, right? And so then the thing you do be like, show me what you wish like this character could do. And then, like that kind of thing. It's like really, really, really symbolic. And so I try to like stay up on like the current things. I have the Stranger Things characters, have a Demogorgon, because that's why I went to grad school. And so, but sand tray is a big one, and I always talk to parents about it in intake in case their kid is like, I played in the sand today, and they're like, what'd you do? And so that's a lot with the younger kids, but a lot of the like older kids and my young adults, we talk about specific like skills to manage anxiety and how to cope, and I'm pretty transparent with what works for me. Because I don't suggest a skill unless I've tried it myself.
Right. Wow. Fascinating. And so what led you to write a book, and what sort of the focus of that, and what are you trying to achieve with the book that you
it's really pretty. So I like for a long time I would think, gosh, there are things that I want to share with the world, because how it works with confidentiality is unless a kid tells me they're going to hurt themselves, someone's hurting them, it stays with me. Yeah. But and so how I keep everyone happy is what I tell parents. I'm like, your parents going to want to know how you're doing. So I'll say either something I said, something we did, but I won't quote you. Yeah. And that's how I toe the line. But there were a lot of things, and there still is, like that are in that gray area that I'm like, gosh, that would be so helpful. I'm like, could I mention that to your mom? I'm like, absolutely not. She'll say, nope, it's because I'm the worst parent ever, and she won't hear.
Yeah.
And so I thought to myself, I was hearing a lot of these repeated things. And I'm like, there are so many people that, because counseling's a luxury, it shouldn't be, but it is,
Yeah.
that don't have access to a quality mental health professional. And
Yeah.
so I want like I'm seeing so many things. It's about 20 years of
Yeah.
things behind the scenes. And then about a decade or so ago, I started doing my own deep healing work. And I was like, oh, I guess there's nuggets I can take from that too. And so it's a combination like memoir, and a podcast I was on, she described it as it's part memoir, part guide to not emotionally damage the next generation, which I thought was pretty great.
Oh, that's
Um,
powerful.
I know. I was like, girl, that's good. And so it's like it's part of my story and like what I needed
Yeah.
and what I'm seeing on the other side of the couch.
Wow, amazing. So I guess what are some of the things, if you've been doing this for a while, what are some of the trends that you see in teens' experiences? Not just compared to before, but just now, like what are some of the real common themes and common threads that teens are going through, and maybe especially female teens? Because I
Yeah.
think that there is a big difference there between what male and female teens are going through.
Yeah, I mean, I think like a tale as old as time, like body image issues,
Yeah,
are a huge thing, and I think that that is also compounded by social media,
yeah,
right? Because the '80s, you see like the magazines, and you just don't pick them up, or you choose to just browse by, but it's
yeah.
everywhere,
Yeah.
and
And there
so
was a time when we were talking about body positivity, not all that many years ago,
yeah,
embracing your body. I think about, for example, the singer Lizzo, who was, she was criticized for loving her body just as it was, and, the whole body positivity movement. And it seems like that was just like a moment in
a
time.
blip, yeah,
Yeah,
a blip.
right?
Yeah, I know people that are part of like they call like the anti like body shaming community that were mad at her, that
Yeah,
they were like, how dare you? And I think the same is true for Megan Trainor.
yeah,
Um, but I think it's also like when Wicked came out, like the Ariana Grande like debacle. I think the house crazy. They're just seeing um, a lot of images, I think, nonstop without even realizing it.
yeah.
So I've said to kids a lot, like, what do you think they're trying to sell you with that? What do you think?
Interesting.
You know,
Such a
how do
profound
you think?
question.
Yeah, like how do you think they'll show me something or tell me something? And I'm like, what do you think, if you think from a marketer's lens, what do they want you to feel about yourself in order to buy their products? And so to like open up those conversations we're not just sitting ducks, that
Mm,
we're actively engaged consumers, to be like, I don't want to buy into that. But I think it's easier said than done. I think
yeah,
it's going to be a tricky dance. I don't think that's ever going to be like resolved.
yeah,
But I see a lot of that, and then that goes into shame and suicidality. I see a lot of suicidal kids, a lot of
yeah,
them, and it doesn't help like when the world is on fire, right? Because
yeah,
they're like, "What's the point?" And you're
yeah,
like, "No, there's a point."
yeah. No, it's the I don't want to get too dark and twisted, but the increase in suicidal
Oh yeah,
ideations is really scary. Um, and it's like our teen brains have been rewired into something that we just don't recognize. Yes, there was always emotional fluctuations. Yes, you always felt crappy about yourself. There was always stuff that teens experienced, but it seemed to be within some type of normal range, whatever that means. And
sure.
now it seems like it's just so extreme and so prevalent and so, I don't know, it's very scary.
Well, yeah, and they're learning terms so young, about like self-harm. And I think that, yeah, I see quite a bit of suicidal clients that are just devoid of hope, I
Yeah.
think. And so that's the really tricky thing, because the kids like can only see this far.
Yeah.
And so like I kind of like urge them to be like you only need to focus on the step in front of you. Like, like to survive today. But I mean, I know you're like, I don't want to get too dark, but I I take great hope to see suicidal kids, because that like it's the ones who aren't talking that I'm afraid for.
Wow.
Like that
So
it's
the
like the
ones who are
ones.
coming to you and who are sharing already are one step ahead.
Yeah, because the kids that like, you hear in the news and they're like, we had no idea. Like, I think that's what's scary.
Mm,
And so like if like a kid is able to like open up like a crack like to the dark, then there's an entry point. But if
yeah.
there's no entry point, then how are
Yeah.
people to know?
Yeah.
And I
Fascinating.
was that kid. I talk about that in my fourth chapter. It's called Denying the Dragon. That I was high performing, but I was hiding all of this
Yes.
darkness. I
Yes.
was shiny,
Yes.
and I was on a big stage. I won a big award, and I went home that night and tried to unalive myself.
Wow.
Nobody knew. And like spoiler alert, I wasn't successful. And so but like nobody knew, and like nobody ended up, it was hush hush. Nobody ended up knowing. But I'm scared for those kids. I'm scared for the ones that were like me.
Yeah. So without sort of revealing too much or delving too much into your own personal story, because I want people to be able to read your book. Um, could you maybe give us like three or four tips or pieces of advice so that we sort of maybe come out with a little bit more hope and optimism of what is it that other therapists, sort of what is it that we can do to support our teens? And then I want to move the conversation to sort of what happens as we age.
Okay. I mean, I think the first one that comes to mind is like the question when you're talking to a kid, do you want to be heard or do you want feedback? Because I think
Wow.
that question can change the course of the conversation. And I have found, even in my own profession, like people pay me for advice, right? But I think that, I mean, they also pay for presence and support, but that 9 times out of 10, kids are like, I just want you to hear me.
Yeah.
Like, and then at that point, they might be open to like, okay, like now what? But I experience over and over, kids are like, I just want you to hear me. Cause it can feel really like patronizing and shaming if you're like, okay, well, like, cause we want them to feel better. So of
Yeah.
course we jump to that. Like
Yeah.
it's out of good intent. We're like, oh, well, I'm older and wiser. So I know you should like just not go to the thing, but like that doesn't help. It
Yeah.
shuts
Just
them
don't look at
down.
social media.
Oh my gosh. I have an honorary niece who's 4. And so like I'll tell her parents some things and they're like, Ada is never getting social media. And I'm like, nope,
Yeah.
no, she is not.
Yeah.
But of course she's going to, because like she's a kid in this world. And so, but don't you worry, her Aunt Stacy's on top of that. And so I think that asking that question, even mid conversation, like is still helpful, because I think that kids are like, I want someone to see me.
Yeah.
I have one kid that says to me almost weekly, this is the only place I go where I'm not interrupted.
Wow.
And I think that particular one is tricky, because I respect so much parents that bring kids to counseling. And also, I see a lot of kids who are the sibling of a perhaps more challenging kid.
Mm.
And the parents are like, we're afraid that they're going to get neglected, their needs. And I
Yeah.
think that that's just brilliant. But that's a kid in that kind of scenario, that it's like they're not a squeaky wheel, and so they're just like, yeah, you're fine though, right? Because like this one is on fire.
Yeah.
Uh, and
Yeah.
so I think that that's important, to make sure we're not interrupting our kids too.
So we've talked a lot about teen trauma and resolving teen trauma. what happens when there is unresolved trauma, and how is it detrimental to women's mental and physical health as we age? And especially, sort of, for me as a menopause educator and coach, and looking at how unresolved trauma can really all of a sudden reappear, or trauma that maybe even you thought you had resolved can all of a sudden reappear in sort of those perimenopause years in your mid 40s very unexpectedly. What are you seeing about sort of how trauma is carried on through
Yeah.
through our lives?
Well, yeah, no, and I think I'm classified in the perimenopause like area. I'd like to be done. That'd be cool. But I believe, and there's no way to prove this, but I believe my mom's breast cancer was a lot agitated by like she had major unresolved trauma.
Yeah.
And so I don't believe that's the sole explanation. But it was pretty bad. It was metastatic and so spread a
Mm.
lot. I always say that if you don't deal with your trauma, it still comes out sideways.
Yeah.
Like that, that it was like, no, I can put it in a box because that's what I thought I could do. I could put my stuff in a box and it'll be nicely organized and filed over there.
Yeah.
You stay over there. But sometimes like it outlives its usefulness. And I
Yeah.
think that the box then becomes our body and it comes like out of our body in like chronic illnesses. And so I know that I am highly susceptible to breast cancer. And so I like make sure that I, get my regular mammograms, but that, they also talk about in the little pamphlets, about keeping your stress low.
Yeah.
And so that there's a significant tie
Yeah.
into that. So I mean, I don't know. There's no way to ever know, but I feel that there was some kind of link between the level of trauma my mom held in her body and how bad her breast cancer was.
Yeah. Do you see that with any of your other patients? Do you see, I agree with you. I'm wondering if you've seen research to back up. Look, we know there is the mind body connection. We know there is the emotional physical connection. We know that our body expresses things physically that it experiences emotionally. But what else have you seen other than from your own personal experience?
Yeah, I see a lot of kids with chronic stomach problems.
Yes.
Um, a lot of that. I like see kids with different kind of like stress disorders, that and like that have like Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And like they have found like in POTS, I see a lot of kids
Yes.
with POTS.
Yes.
And so I think that there's a tie in there, like somatic. My therapist is a somatic therapist,
Mm,
and so I've learned a lot from her about like the body giving signals to the brain as opposed to vice versa.
yeah.
That it's like that it's mainly from the body, and so I have incorporated a lot of I tell kids like your grand therapist says. And so, but that there's a lot of things that they can do to be back in touch with their body. Like I
Yeah.
have a kid that is having explosive meltdowns. And so I've been talking with the parents about like getting her connected back to her body,
Yeah.
to stay in her body and to be aware of what they are feeling, to like bring something to the table instead of just like feelings that there's tangible things you can do with your
Yeah.
body.
Yeah. Yeah. You said you work with, and are you seeing it in older clients also, or you see it mostly with the kids?
Yeah, I see a lot of young adults that have like physical challenges that often get dismissed.
Yes.
They're just like, I have one in particular that is having pretty significant physical challenges, and they keep telling her that it's because of stress. And I do not believe the things that she's experiencing are like just solely mental.
Yeah.
And so I don't like, I feel like they're, sure, like we could all use like more support.
Yeah.
But I think that, yeah, like we're experiencing a lot. And like, I think, COVID did a number on like all of our minds and bodies.
Yeah.
That was a big
Are
one.
you
And so yeah,
are you seeing impacts of COVID now?
yeah. Yeah, I see like Ada, who I reference, is like a COVID kid was like born during that time. And the teachers like talk about like there's just a different like social level that they weren't
Yeah.
socialized. I'm seeing kids that that there's resentment of the things that they lost during that time.
Yeah.
That there was an like excessive use of the internet to do schoolwork. And so, I feel like, it changed a lot of things. It was just a bizarre time for
Yeah,
everyone.
I don't think we have begun to scratch the surface of the long-term implications, and not just
Yes.
for those people who are experiencing health and long COVID, but the social
Yes.
implications
Yeah.
of that generation of kids, the
Yes.
academic implications, I don't think we've even begun to realize what these kids, the
Yes.
repercussions that these kids have
Yes.
experienced.
Yes, I know. I had a kid during that time because like I went home and like everybody else had to, and then but I felt like my clients were suffering,
Mm.
like not being able to see their therapist, and so I was one of the first to get like the healthcare like shot, and so I came back when the tattoo parlors opened because I'm like, if you can get a tattoo, your 12-year-old can see their therapist. So I
Yeah.
came back fairly quickly, like with precautions, but because I was doing it was just like it was so sad. And so you were there. And so one of my clients said, I I've been cheating like at school and like you and all your classmates.
Yeah.
Like, and so I think there are so many like challenges that happened. And I think it reduced some hope for kids, that, I talked
Mm.
about having an existential crisis. I feel like a lot of kids were like, here we go, because it just, it's been a really bizarre past 6 years.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't think we talk about social media, we talk about like the obvious things. I feel sometimes we don't realize the non-obvious things. Like, yes, we know divorce potentially can impact your child. Yes, we know that not feeling safe in a school environment is going to impact your child. Yes, we know that trauma is going to impact your child, but no one knows how 2 or 3 years of COVID or however long it was in your location and what that meant and what that did and how that impacted you. And so the ramifications of that, like these are things that we really are not, we don't yet realize.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and depending on like the political environment in the home,
Yeah,
like the viewpoint of like who's like dropping the ball. Like there's so many, because I see a variety of people, their beliefs all over the map.
yeah.
And so I think that contributed to a lot. Yeah, kids all like talk and they're like, yeah, and that was ruined because COVID anyway, and blah blah blah. And so that was hard. I hear a lot about, and there's a thing when kids are in sixth grade here,
Yeah.
called outdoor lab, and it is like a week where they go up to the mountains and there's like a
Yes.
mountain school and it's like
Yeah.
super fun. Well, the kids that were sixth graders that year missed out. They didn't get to do it the next year. So
Right.
I still hear from kids that were in sixth grade then, like, yeah, because I missed outdoor lab, and so it's just like, and
Yeah.
so that, like, that's a thing. And that I think is like focused on a lot. Kids are about like, what did I miss during that time, and that connection and the sports. I had a kid that was a competitive swimmer, and the mom was like, just practice in the bathtub. And they were like,
Oh my gosh.
yeah. And so I'm like, yeah, I can see how that wouldn't land as validating. I
Yeah.
can see that. Yeah.
Um, I guess as we sort of come to the end of our conversation, I want to ask you about resilience because that word hasn't really come up at all for us. But we talk about how kids are resilient and kids can manage with things in ways we don't give them credit for. And how do you see resilience playing a role in all the things that we've been talking about?
Yeah. Oh, that's a hot button for me. That is one of my favorite words to be described as. Also true is that sometimes it gets on my nerves
Yeah.
when people say kids are resilient, because I have friends who are therapists for adults, and what are their clients talking about? Their childhoods.
Yeah.
And so kids like have to cope, because what are their other choices?
Yeah.
So there's a right spectrum of like coping strategies, but I feel like sometimes we use that as a shield,
Yeah.
to not give kids the skills they need to carry into adulthood, because really kids are resilient, like they'll bounce
I know.
back.
It's sort of like such a brush away comment. It's sort of like it solves all the problems. Don't worry, because
Yes,
kids are resilient. They can cope with lots of different challenges.
yes, yes.
It doesn't really give them credit for what they're really going through.
Correct. And so I feel like, yeah, like, because they had to be, like, how are you so strong? Like, people ask me, how are you so strong? What were my other choices?
Yeah. But that
Like
doesn't mean it's an ideal situation.
right. Like, it's no, there wasn't a buffet of, and I was like, resilience, that it was like, that's what you do to survive. Also true is, we need to be giving our kids more support in order for them to have an easier time as adults. It's still gonna be hard. You've been outside. It's still hard.
Yeah.
But I love what I do, because I feel like I'm catching them on the front end, because how amazing would that be to know how to not be passive aggressive when you're 10?
Yeah.
Like, that'd be cool. Or
Or
learn,
when you're 20.
or when you're 20, or like to learn what red flags are. That is one thing I'll give social media. I am a fan of social media, because it connects us, like it's a good thing.
Yeah.
But has challenges like with anything. But social media has given kids more language for
Mm,
mental health. Like the red flag thing is pretty popular right now,
right.
but like, also they have to be really educated in that, because not everything's a red flag. Someone having a bad day isn't a red flag.
Yeah. Or
Spoiler alert.
I know kids use quite frequently, I feel triggered.
Yeah, right,
And
right.
that's sort of like also a catch-all, like, like a phrase that kids like to throw out as a sort of, like, do they really know what they're saying? Are they really being triggered? What is triggering them? How is it triggering them? Kids just like to sort of throw out, you're triggering me.
Yeah, they throw out bipolar a lot too. Like, they're like, I was in such a good mood earlier, I must be bipolar. I'm like, or you're human. That could be another
Yeah.
possibility.
Right.
Perhaps.
So, is there anything that we haven't shared, that we haven't talked about, that you think is really important, that parents, mothers, caregivers listening really need to know before we sort of close up?
The very first thing that came to mind is, if there is a kid that comes to you with a trauma, a situation, a conflict, what matters more is your response to that. That research shows that that is more significant than how the trauma lands. And
Mm,
so that it's important, to, obviously people are afraid and scared if something is presented to them,
yeah,
but to be open, and to not shut down the line of conversation is a pretty significant choice.
yeah, really, really important. Um, so I guess we come to the last question that I always ask my guests. And that is, this podcast is called The Things I Want My Daughters to Know. And I want to know what you want your daughters to know. And they can be your goddaughters, your nieces, that figurative daughter of that of the next generation coming up. What message do you want them to know? What is the thing that you could want to shout from the rooftops to our daughters coming ahead, coming after us?
I would want to say, and I'm picturing little Ada, in her little bluey dress. I would want to say that it is never a good idea to hand over the key to your self worth to anybody else.
Mm,
And that we do that, adults do that. We do that a lot. that were like, how am I being perceived? But that every time you keep that key to yourself, it's a win for you.
Yeah. So powerful and so difficult to achieve, but I think I agree with you. I think it's probably one of the most important thing is to know your own self-worth is dependent on nothing else that is happening externally to you. But yeah, in our world today, it's so difficult for them
So
to
hard.
internalize that, right?
No, no, and for them to know that they're human, and I think that sometimes we forget that and don't give ourselves the grace that we're going to make mistakes. It's like your job, and so that like yeah, I people confess things to me all the time. I'm like, because you're like human, right? Like one of my clients is really upset that she's going to be perceived as not perfect, and I was
Yeah,
like, spoiler alert, you're not though.
yeah,
It's going to save you a lot of time to not believe that.
yeah. So profound. Stacey, this has been amazing. Tell my audience where they can get you, where they can reach out to you, how they can access your book.
Yeah. So I'm sure it'll be in the show notes because there's a million ways to spell my
Yes.
name. But it is stacyschaffer.com. And on the website, you can if you put in your email address, you can access the first chapter of my book for free.
Oh, wow.
Uh,
Amazing.
yeah. So you can get that. And then there's a link. It's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. I did my own audiobook. I flew to Nashville to do that. And so if you like this
Wow.
voice, I know. If you like this voice, it's on Audible and Spotify.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you, Stacey. This has been really profound. I know probably quite difficult for some of our listeners to hear, but I don't want to shy away from difficult conversations. And I think you have given us some really hopeful things also in the conversation. And it hasn't just been, dark and depressing because these conversations sometimes can be. But I do think there's been a lot of really important things that you've shared. So I really want to thank you. I want to thank you for your work that you do. And thank you for joining me today and for sharing your wisdom. Everyone, reach out to Stacey. Her contacts are all going to be in the show notes. Thank you for joining me for this episode for the Things I Want My Daughters to Know podcast. And join me for our next episode next week. Can't wait to see you then.
Thank you for having me.